The rusted sign for Dreamland Acres loomed over them, its metal groaning faintly in a breeze that didn't seem to reach the ground. One of its grinning clown mascots hung upside down by a single bolt, its painted smile flaking away to reveal diseased-looking patches of rust, like a festering wound. The chain-link fence, topped with sagging coils of concertina wire, had been peeled back like the lid of a tin can, an open invitation that felt more like a threat. "You sure about this, Leah?" Honey whispered, adjusting the strap of her backpack. Her voice sounded unnaturally loud. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip, a weak, watery light that cast long, skeletal shadows from the silent roller coaster tracks. Leah, camera already in hand, just flashed a grin that was part excitement, part challenge. "Are you kidding? Look at this place. It's perfectly preserved decay." Leah was the brave one, the one who saw urban decay as art. Honey was the one who saw tetanus, trespassing charges, and ghosts. They slipped through the gap in the fence, the jagged metal snagging a thread from Honey's jacket with a sharp zip. The silence was the first thing that hit them. It wasn't just quiet. It was a thick, suffocating blanket, a vacuum where sound should be. No birds, no distant traffic, not even the rustle of wind in the dead weeds. Just the crunch of their own boots on the cracked asphalt, a sound that seemed to be instantly swallowed by the air. The ground was littered with faded, soggy tickets that looked like dead leaves or shed skin. Their first stop was the main midway. The game stalls were still standing, their garish paint peeling in long, curling strips. Inside one, bottle up! A row of plush bears sat staring with single, milky plastic eyes, their fur matted and dark with mildew. They looked less like prizes and more like victims. Honey jumped, a small, sharp gasp escaping her, when a gust of wind, appearing from nowhere in the still air, knocked a stack of wooden milk bottles over with a hollow. "Just the wind," Leah said, already snapping pictures, the click of her shutter sounding like a gunshot. But Honey stared at the bottles. They hadn't just fallen. They were now stacked perfectly, just on their sides. A neat, horizontal pyramid, as if a poltergeist had tidied up. They moved deeper towards the kiddie corner. The carousel stood in the center, a ring of pastel-colored horses, frozen in mid-gallop. Their paint was blistered. Their glass bead eyes were gone, leaving dark, hollow sockets that seemed to follow them. Their carved lips were pulled back in expressions that were less like joyful neighs and more like silent, agonized screams. "Creepy," Honey murmured, tracing the outline of a missing eye with her finger. The wood beneath was damp and soft. "Beautiful," Leah breathed, focusing her lens. "The entropy is just perfect." As Leah circled the ride, snapping photos of the decay, Honey felt a strange pull. It was almost a physical tug, centered in her stomach. The carousel's music box, a silent, ornate brass thing on the central pillar, seemed to draw her gaze. She stepped up onto the platform, the wood groaning under her weight, a low, mournful sound like a sigh. One horse, a pale white one with a chipped golden horn, seemed cleaner than the others. Its saddle was worn, yes, but not rotted. The leather was cracked, but looked almost polished by something or someone. "Hey, Honey, get off that thing," Leah called, her voice sounding unusually sharp, echoing slightly. "It's not safe. The wood's probably rotten." Honey backed away, a weird, prickly feeling crawling up her spine. The pull vanished, leaving her feeling slightly nauseous. "Right, sorry." As she stepped off the platform, she thought she heard it. A single wheezing note, like an accordion breathing its last, hanging in the dead air for just a moment before being smothered by the silence. "Did you hear that?" Honey asked, her heart suddenly rabbiting against her ribs. Leah lowered her camera, frowning. "Hear what? The sound of you freaking me out? Come on, let's check out the funhouse before we lose the light." The funhouse, Professor Giggles's Hall of Whimsy, was anything but. The grinning fiberglass face at the entrance had a long crack running from its right eye to its gaping mouth, making it look like it was weeping plaster. Inside, the air was cold, 10 degrees cooler than the midway, and smelled of ozone, thick dust, and something sickeningly sweet, like burnt sugar and spoiled fruit. They navigated the first section, a room of warped mirrors that had grown cloudy with grime. Honey saw herself, stretched and gaunt, her eyes vast, dark pools of shadow in a skeletal face. Leah, next to her, was compressed, squat, her grin taking up half her body. "We look ridiculous," Leah laughed, the sound muffled by the damp, heavy air. She snapped a photo of her own distorted reflection. But in the mirror's warped surface, Honey saw something else. Behind Leah's reflection, standing just in the shadows of the hallway they'd just left, was a figure. It was tall and painfully thin, wearing what looked like a tattered park employee uniform. But its head was one of the oversized, smiling mascot heads. The grinning clown from the entrance. It stood perfectly, impossibly still. Honey screamed and spun around. The hallway was empty, just dust motes dancing in the beam of her phone's flashlight. "What? What is it?" Leah yelled, dropping her camera to her chest, her hand flying to her throat. I thought I saw someone," Honey stammered, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. In the mirror, a mascot, the clown. Leah's face went pale in the dim light. She shone her own flashlight down the hall. Nothing, just peeling paint and soggy, trodden-on confetti. "Honey, you're letting this place get to you. There's no one here, it's just us." But her voice wavered, the bravado completely gone, replaced by a thin, reedy fear. "Let's get out of the funhouse, Leah. Now, please." They stumbled out, not bothering with the rest of the maze, shoving through a set of creaking saloon doors at a side exit. They burst out into the fading light, gasping for air that didn't smell of rot. The sun was a bloody smear on the horizon. The park was sinking into a deep, purple-black gloom, the shadows no longer looking like skeletons, but like solid, grasping things. "Okay, you're right," Leah said, her voice quiet, shaky. "This place is a lot. We should probably go. I think I've got enough pictures." Agreed. Honey had never agreed with anything more in her life. They started back down the midway, walking faster now, their boots sending clouds of dust up from the asphalt. The silence they'd first noticed seemed to have changed. It wasn't empty anymore. Now it felt like it was listening, holding its breath. They passed the game stalls again. Honey, against her better judgment, looked at the bottle-up booth with the bears. They weren't on the shelf. All of them, a dozen moldy, one-eyed plush toys, were arranged on the wooden counter, facing outward. They'd been set up in a perfect, neat little row. Their heads were tilted as if curious, and their little stitched mouths all seemed to be smiling. "Leah," Honey whispered, her voice cracking as she pulled on her friend's arm. Leah saw them. She didn't say a word. She just grabbed Honey's hand, her grip painfully tight, and started to run. They pounded down the asphalt, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the twilight. And that's when the music started. It was the carousel. Faint, tinny, and impossibly loud. The wheezing calliope music ground to life. A cheerful, upbeat tune made monstrous by the decay. It was a jerky, stuttering melody, as if the gears were filled with sand, each note scraping against the next. The sound vibrated in Honey's teeth. They both stopped, frozen, halfway between the funhouse and the exit. The carousel was turning. Slowly, agonizingly, the platform was rotating. The horses, with their hollow eyes, bobbed up and down, their movements stiff and uncoordinated. And on the pale white horse, the one with the broken horn, sat the mascot, the tall, thin figure in the tattered uniform, its grinning clown head fixed forward, rotating with the ride. It didn't look at them. Its oversized, gloved hands were clamped rigidly on the golden pole. It just rode. "It's a squatter," Leah said, her voice a tiny, trembling thing. "Just some psycho in a suit trying to scare us." "He's not moving, Leah," Honey whispered, hot tears of panic blurring her vision. "His head, it's not turning. He's just riding. He's part of it." The sound came from the game stall behind them. They turned. The wooden milk bottles were stacking themselves. One by one, they flew from the ground and landed perfectly on top of each other, forming a neat pyramid, then scattering, then stacking again. A low, giggling sound, like a child's laugh played through a broken speaker, echoed from the funhouse, bouncing off the facades of the midway. Whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. In the test your strength game, The heavy mallet was lifting itself into the air and slamming down on the pad, again and again and again. The bell at the top, rusted and dead, began to ring with a dull, insistent thud, thud, thud. The park was waking up. "Run," Honey breathed. They didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted for the fence, for the gap that suddenly seemed miles away. The calliope music swelled, faster and louder, a manic, discordant carnival tune. The giggling from the funhouse turned into a high-pitched, metallic shriek. All around them, the long dead rides groaned, metal scraping on metal. A swing on a nearby swing set lifted, as if carrying an invisible child, and the giant roller coaster let out a deep, echoing groan as one of the cars shunted forward a few feet on the track. They reached the fence, tumbling through the gap, scraping hands and knees on the gravel beyond. They didn't stop running until they were in Leah's car, doors locked, engine roaring to life. They sped down the access road, branches scraping the car's sides like claws. The park and its terrible rising music disappeared in the rearview mirror. As they hit the main highway, Leah finally slowed, pulling over to the shoulder, her whole body shaking so hard the steering wheel rattled. We're okay," she gasped, her knuckles white. "We're out. It was just old machinery, wind, freaky squatters." She was trying to convince herself. Honey just stared at her own reflection in the side mirror. Her face was chalk white, streaked with dirt and tears. "Did you see its hand?" "What, the mascot?" "On the carousel," Honey said, her voice flat, dead. It waved, right as we ran. A little tiny wave. "Goodbye." Leah didn't answer. She just put the car in drive and pulled back onto the highway, driving far too fast, away from the encroaching night. Honey turned to look out the back window. The park was gone, hidden by the trees. But in her backpack, which she'd thrown on the back seat, something was moving. A small, jerky, repetitive movement. Leah saw her looking, her eyes wide with fresh terror in the rearview mirror. "What is it? Honey, what is it?" Slowly, her hands trembling, Honey reached back and unzipped the side pocket of her bag. She pulled out a small, moldy, one-eyed teddy bear. It hadn't been there before. It smelled of dust and burnt sugar. Its tiny plush arm was raised, its stitched-on smile seeming to stretch wider in the car's dim interior light. It was waving. Alan's tripod clicked softly as he adjusted the legs, the sound unnervingly loud, an auditory intrusion in the oppressive silence. Before him, the main gate of Wonderland stood like a rusted iron jaw, its once cheerful rainbow paint flaking away in large, diseased patches to reveal a skeleton of rot. The park had been closed for 25 years, shuttered overnight after a tragic incident the local papers had delicately skirted and long since buried. Rumors of a gas leak, a faulty ride, a missing child. The ambiguity was the allure. For an urban explorer and photographer like Alan, this place wasn't just a location. It was the Holy Grail. He'd slipped the fence at dusk, the no trespassing sign so faded by sun and rain, it felt more like a nostalgic suggestion than a legal warning. Now, the last rays of the sun bled out behind the skeletal silhouette of the Skyflyer roller coaster, a structure that looked less like a ride and more like the exposed ribcage of a forgotten beast. The midway was cast in a deep, bruised purple, a heavy twilight that felt suffocating. The air was thick and still, heavy with the smell of decay, wet plaster, and something cloyingly sweet, like phantom cotton candy, a sugary ghost that clung to the back of his throat. His camera, a high-end mirrorless, felt solid and reassuring in his hands. He was here for the beauty in the decay, he told himself, the narrative of nature reclaiming the artificial. But he knew, in a place his pride didn't like to admit, that he was also here for the chill, the transgression, the feeling of walking somewhere he shouldn't. He started down the main midway. Faded mascots, Barnaby Bear and Rachel Raccoon, stared from peeling billboards with overly white, manic grins that seemed to widen in the deepening shadows. A stroller lay on its side, one wheel spinning lazily, almost rhythmically, in a breeze that Alan absolutely couldn't feel on his own skin. He stopped, holding his breath, waiting for the spin to slow. It didn't. He forced himself to move on, pausing by a whack-a-weasel game. The rubber mallets were gone, stolen by time or vandals, but the rubbery, grinning weasels remained, their painted faces chipped, their spring-loaded necks frozen in various states of emergence. He leaned in close to frame a shot, the camera's autofocus humming faintly, focusing on the cracked, milky eye of a single weasel. Thwack. Alan recoiled, stumbling back. The sound was sharp, definitive, the unmistakable impact of wood on metal and rubber. It had come from inside the game booth. He looked up, his heart hammering against his ribs. A single weasel head, one he hadn't been focused on, was now fully extended, its grin seeming to mock him, its painted eyes perfectly level with his. "Just rust," he muttered, his voice sounding thin. Old springs finally giving way. He took the picture, his hand unsteady, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt expectant. He felt a prickle on his neck, the unmistakable primal sensation of being watched. He found himself drawn to the Giggle Time Funhouse, as if pulled by an invisible string. The entrance was a grotesque clown's mouth, its red paint lips cracked like sun-baked skin, the black-painted throat of the entrance, a perfect, light-swallowing void. He switched on his headlamp, its beam cutting a bright, sterile cone into the pitch-black interior. The first section was a hall of mirrors. His own reflection, distorted and multiplied, was his only companion. He was lean and tall, but the mirrors turned him into 1,000 warped goblins, fat, skeletal, impossibly tall, unnaturally short. As he passed a large central pane, he saw it, a flash of movement in the glass, something small and fast, darting behind his own reflection. It wasn't a reflection of him, it was an addition. He spun around. The corridor was empty, just peeling paint and dust motes dancing in his headlamp beam. He turned back to the mirror. Just him, his face pale, his eyes wide and stark. "Hello," he called out, the words sounding foolish and thin. Only the echo of his own voice replied, bouncing back at him from the mirrored walls. But as the echo faded, he heard something else, a high-pitched, faint tittering, like a child trying and failing to suppress a fit of giggles. It wasn't in front of him or behind him. It sounded like it was coming from inside the mirrors themselves. "Right," Alan said, his voice strained. "Super creepy. Got it." He tried to sound detached, professional, but his hands were shaking so badly he had to lower his camera. He moved faster, pushing through the disorienting maze, the giggling seeming to follow him, always just at the edge of his hearing. He finally burst through a set of heavy canvas flaps into the final room, a large open space with a floor that undulated in a sick, wave-like pattern, designed to throw people off balance. And in the center of the room, on the highest peak of the floor, sat a single red and white striped ball. It was impossibly bright, as if it had been manufactured yesterday. As Alan watched, his breath catching in his chest, the ball rolled. It didn't roll down the incline, as gravity demanded. It rolled up, crested the peak, and then stopped, perfectly still, as if waiting for him to fetch it. The giggling was louder now, a cold, sharp sound that pricked at his skin. It wasn't in the room, it was in his head, coming from everywhere at once, a stereo of malice. He fumbled for his camera, snapping a single, blurry shot before backing out the way he came. He didn't want to go back through the mirrors, but he wanted to be near that ball even less. He emerged from the funhouse into near-total darkness. The moon had risen, a cold silver disk, casting the park in a sickly, overexposed light. He needed to leave. He just wanted one good shot of the carousel, the park's centerpiece, and then he was gone. The Grand Carousel was in the Central Plaza. It was a beautiful, three-tiered monstrosity. The painted horses were frozen mid-gallop, their glass-bead eyes lifeless and vacant, their ornate saddles covered in bird droppings and filth. A thick, rusted chain was padlocked around the main control panel, securing it in death. Alan set up his tripod, composing the shot. The moon lit the carousel perfectly, highlighting the tragic grandeur. He was adjusting his focus, looking through the viewfinder at a horse with a chipped ear, when he heard it. A slow metallic groan, a sound of immense weight moving on dry, rusted bearings. He looked up from his viewfinder. One of the horses, a black stallion with a chipped mane and a bared teeth snarl, was rocking. Back and forth, its brass pole grinding in its socket. Alan's blood ran cold. He scanned the trees. There was no wind. Not a single leaf on the overgrown oaks was moving. Then another horse began to move, and another. All around the carousel, the dead horses began to rock, faster and faster, jerking an unnatural, a discordant, groaning symphony. The giggling returned, no longer suppressed. It was a full-blown, shrieking laugh, echoing from the defunct speakers above the carousel, tinny and distorted. And then the music started. A warped calliope tune, Pop Goes the Weasel, wheezed to life. It was a cheerful melody, but the player was broken, skipping and dragging, hitting sour, atonal notes that grated on his nerves. "No," Alan whispered, backing away, grabbing his tripod. "No way." That's when the poltergeist truly revealed itself. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a violent, physical shove from behind, cold and hard, that sent him sprawling to the pavement. His camera flew from the tripod, skittering across the concrete. "Hey!" he yelled, a mix of fear and anger. He scrambled for his camera, but it was suddenly kicked away, sent sliding a dozen feet toward the carousel as if by an invisible foot. "Stop it!" He lunged for it, and this time, an unseen force grabbed his ankle. He felt it. It wasn't a hand. It was a cold, hard, electrical grip that tightened with impossible, crushing strength. He was dragged, his knees and elbows scraping on the rough ground, his tripod left behind. He kicked and yelled, clawing at the pavement. The calliope music swelled, the weasel popping over and over, the shrieking laughter woven into it. He was being pulled directly toward the now frantically rocking horses, their glass eyes seeming to glitter with malicious life. With a final, desperate twist, he kicked his leg free. He heard a snap of spectral frustration, an angry, childish wail that cut through the music like breaking ice. He got to his feet, ignoring his bleeding camera. He ran. He didn't run for the gate. He just ran, pure instinct, pure terror. He vaulted a concession stand, crashing through a pile of rotting, stuffed Barnaby bears, their plush bodies bursting with gray, musty stuffing. He could hear it behind him. Not footsteps. The sound of things moving. A trash can flew past his head, missing him by inches, and crashed against the side of a Dippin' Dots stand with a sound like a gong. A heavy cast-iron park bench slid across the path, blocking his way. He hurdled it, his lungs burning. The entire park had come alive. Objects flew from the game stalls, baseballs, milk jugs, plastic hoops. They didn't just fall, they were thrown, aimed at his head with malicious, petulant intent. A souvenir shop door slammed open, and a blizzard of postcards and snow globes flew out at him, the postcards flashing with images of happy, sunlit families, the snow globes shattering on the ground around his feet. He was screaming now, a raw, mindless sound that didn't even sound like him. He finally saw the main gate, a blacker black against the night sky. He was 10 feet away when the force hit him again, this time in the chest. It was like being kicked by a mule. He flew backward, hitting the pavement so hard the air was driven from his body in a single, agonizing whoosh. He lay there, gasping, spots dancing in his vision. The calliope music stopped. The flying debris clattered to the ground. The park was dead silent again. A silence so profound it was worse than the noise. He could feel it, though, standing over him. The air was frigid and the smell of cotton candy was so strong it was choking, making him gag. He heard the giggle one last time. It wasn't in his head. It was right next to his ear, a wet, cold puff of air against his cheek, carrying the single whispered word, "Gotcha." The massive iron-scrolled Wonderland sign above the gate groaned. a slow, tearing sound of tortured metal. With a final, explosive shriek, it tore free from its mountings and began to fall, a 4-ton guillotine of shadow, directly toward him. Alan didn't even have time to roll. He just closed his eyes. He woke to the sound of sirens and the flashing of blue and red lights. He was on the outside of the gate, his body aching as if he'd been in a car crash. The massive sign lay twisted on the pavement inside the park, right where he had been lying. He'd been thrown clear through the solid bars. An impossible physics. He never got his camera back. He never got his tripod. He told the police he'd been mugged, that some kids in the park had beaten him up and stolen his gear. They looked at the sign, then at him, their faces a mask of disbelief, but they didn't have another explanation. Alan never went urban exploring again. He sold his remaining cameras and took a job processing insurance claims. It was dull, gray, and colorless, but it was safe. Sometimes, though, late at night when his office was quiet and he was the last one there, he would swear he could hear it, faint and far away. The tinny, broken sound of a calliope and the high-pitched, cold laughter of a child who never got to leave and who never wanted to play alone.